The message came through the quantum relay at 0347 hours, ship time. Commander Sarah Chan of the UES Horizon read it twice before the words truly sank in. Scout Team Delta 7 had gone silent in the Kepler 442 system. Last transmission indicated they were investigating unusual energy readings from the third planet. Marcus Rivera had been leading Delta 7 for 3 years. He was one of the best scouts in the fleet, known for his ability to slip in and out of hostile territory without leaving a trace. If Marcus and his team had gone dark, it meant trouble. Chun immediately dispatched a search and rescue team, but deep down, she knew what they would find. The Kepler system was in contested space, right on the border between human territory and the Vrak Confederacy. The lizard-like aliens had been testing human defenses for months, probing for weaknesses. 12 hours later, the rescue team confirmed her worst fears. They found the wreckage of Delta 7's stealth ship on the planet's surface. All 5 crew members were dead, executed with precise plasma burns to the back of the head. It was a Vrak calling card. The news spread through the fleet like wildfire. Marcus Rivera wasn't just any scout. He was beloved by his crew, respected by his peers, and had saved countless lives during the Titan Station siege 2 years ago. But more importantly, he had family in the fleet. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Rivera received the news while he was cleaning his rifle in the armory of the UES Retribution. The weapon was his pride and joy, a custom-built electromagnetic sniper rifle capable of accurate shots at distances exceeding 15 kilometers. Jake had crafted every component himself, from the quantum-stabilized barrel to the neural interface targeting system. When the messenger delivered the encrypted datapad, Jake's hands went very still. He read the message once, then set the pad down carefully on his workbench. For a long moment, he simply stared at the weapon in his hands. Marcus had been more than just his younger brother. They had grown up together on the mining colony of New Perth, watching their parents work themselves to death in the asteroid belts. When the Vrak had first made contact with humanity 20 years ago, both brothers had enlisted immediately. Marcus became a scout because he was curious about the universe. Jake became a sniper because he believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Now Marcus was dead, and Jake knew exactly who was responsible. The Vrak Confederacy had been playing games with humanity for years. They would probe human defenses, test response times, and occasionally kill a few humans just to see what would happen. The politicians back on Earth kept calling for restraint for diplomatic solutions. They didn't understand what Jake had learned during his tours in the outer colonies. The only thing the Vrak understood was strength. They respected power and despised weakness. Every time humanity tried to negotiate, the Vrak saw it as an invitation to push harder. Jake stood up and walked to his weapons locker. Inside were 3 other rifles, each one designed for a specific purpose. But for what he had in mind, he would need something special. He pulled out a case that he hadn't opened in over a year. Inside was his masterpiece. The weapon had no official designation, but Jake called it the Widowmaker. It was a hybrid energy projectile rifle that could fire both traditional ammunition and focused plasma beams. The range was incredible, and the targeting system was so advanced it bordered on precognition. Jake had built the Widowmaker during his recovery from a mission that had gone wrong in the Centauri system. A Vrak ambush had killed his entire team, leaving him wounded and alone on a hostile world for 3 weeks. He had promised himself that if he ever got the chance for payback, he would be ready. Now that chance had come. Jake began to methodically prepare his equipment. He requisitioned supplies, filed mission reports, and submitted requests for extended leave. To anyone watching, it would look like a grieving brother taking time to process his loss. But Jake wasn't planning to grieve. He was planning to hunt. The Vrak had killed his brother thinking they were sending a message to humanity. They wanted to show that humans were weak, that they could be picked off one by one without consequence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Jake Rivera was no ordinary human soldier. He was something the Vrak had never encountered before, a human who had nothing left to lose and everything he needed to take revenge. The war was about to change, and it would start with a single shot fired by a man who loved his brother more than he feared death. Jake's preparations took exactly 72 hours. He studied every piece of intelligence the fleet had on Vrak operations in the Kepler system, memorized patrol patterns, and analyzed atmospheric conditions on 17 different worlds. The Vrak weren't random killers. They were methodical, which meant they could be predicted. The breakthrough came when he accessed Marcus's final mission logs. His brother had discovered something on Kepler 442c before he died. Energy signatures that matched Vrak shield generators, but in patterns that suggested a permanent installation rather than a temporary base. The Vrak were building something big in human space, and Marcus had found it. Jake smiled grimly as he plotted his course. The Vrak had killed his brother to protect a secret, but they had made a critical mistake. They had left the evidence behind, thinking no one would be able to piece it together. They didn't understand how human brothers thought, how they shared everything with each other. Marcus had taught Jake to read energy signatures when they were teenagers, working together in their father's electronics shop. Jake had taught Marcus to shoot, spending countless hours in the colony's firing range. Now Jake would use both skills to avenge his brother's death. The U.S. Retribution's commanding officer, Captain Elena Vasquez, approved Jake's request for independent reconnaissance without question. She had lost people to Vrak attacks before and understood the need for intelligence gathering. What she didn't know was that Jake had no intention of simply gathering intelligence. Jake departed in a modified scout ship that he had personally upgraded over the past year. The vessel looked standard from the outside, but inside it was a precision instrument designed for one purpose: getting a sniper into position undetected. Advanced stealth systems, extended life support, and a firing port that could open without compromising the ship's signature. The journey to Kepler 442 took 6 days at maximum burn. Jake spent the time in meditation, a practice he had learned from a Buddhist monk on Titan Station. The monk had taught him that anger was a tool, but only if it could be controlled and focused. Unfocused rage made poor shots. Controlled fury made perfect ones. When Jake reached the system, he began his hunt immediately. The Vrak installation was hidden on the dark side of the third planet's largest moon, protected by a network of sensor drones and automated defenses. It was impressive, but it had one fatal flaw. The Vrak had designed it to defend against ships, not against a single human with patience and the right equipment. Jake positioned his ship in the shadow of an asteroid field and began to observe. For 48 hours, he watched and learned. The Vrak followed precise schedules, rotating guards every 6 hours and conducting perimeter sweeps every 3. They were disciplined, but discipline could become predictability. On the third day, Jake saw his target. A tall Vrak officer emerged from the main facility, distinguished by the blood-red markings on his scales and the ceremonial weapon at his side. Jake's enhanced optics identified him immediately. Warprime Zethkar, the commanding officer responsible for all Vrak operations in this sector. The same alien who had ordered the attack on Marcus's team. Jake had spent years studying Vrak hierarchy and culture. Warprimes were the elite of their species, genetically enhanced warriors who commanded absolute respect from their subordinates. Killing a Warprime would be the equivalent of a human losing a general, an admiral, and a senator all at once. But Jake wasn't satisfied with just killing Zethkar. That would be too quick, too clean. The Vrak had executed his brother like an animal, so Jake decided to return the favor. He would make Zethkar watch his subordinates die first, one by one, until the Warprime understood the price of killing a human's family. The first shot came at dawn on the 4th day. A Vrak sentry was making his rounds near the facility's outer perimeter when his head simply vanished in a spray of purple blood. The electromagnetic projectile had traveled 12 kilometers through thin atmosphere to find its target, guided by Jake's neural interface and years of experience. The Vrak immediately went to high alert, but they were looking for ships, not a single sniper positioned impossibly far away. Their sensors couldn't detect Jake's position, and their return fire was ineffective at such range. 6 hours later, Jake took his second shot. Another sentry, this one inside the facility's courtyard. The Vrak began to panic, their orderly movements becoming frantic as they realized they were being hunted by something they couldn't see or understand. By the end of the first day, Jake had killed 7 Vrak soldiers with 7 shots. Each target had been precisely chosen to maximize psychological impact while demonstrating the hunter's incredible skill. The Vrak were used to fighting enemies they could see armies they could meet in battle. They had never faced a human sniper before. On the second day, Jake began leaving messages with his kills. Small devices that broadcast Marcus's final transmission, the desperate calls for help that had gone unanswered. The Vrak would find these recordings next to their dead comrades, a reminder of why this was happening to them. Warprime Zethkar finally understood what he was facing when he found the 13th device. He played the recording and heard a young human voice calling for extraction, pleading for someone to answer. The Warprime superior mind began to make connections, to understand the relationship between the dead scout and the invisible killer who was destroying his command. That night, Zethkar sent out a transmission on all frequencies, speaking in broken human standard. "Human sniper, I know you hear this. Your brother died with honor. End this hunt, and we will speak of terms." Jake's response was delivered at dawn the next day. A perfect shot that destroyed Zethkar's personal communication array, followed by a message of his own. "No terms. No merci. You wanted to see what happens when you kill a human's family. Keep watching." The siege lasted for 2 weeks. Jake had turned the Vrak installation into a prison, with himself as the executioner. No one could leave without being shot. No one could call for help without their communications being destroyed. Warprime Zethkar watched his forces dwindle from 300 warriors to fewer than 50. The Vrak tried everything. They sent out decoy teams to draw Jake's fire, but he ignored the obvious traps and continued picking off real targets. They attempted to rush his position with overwhelming numbers, but Jake simply relocated and continued his methodical killing. They even tried to negotiate again, offering prisoner exchanges and territorial concessions. Jake's answer never changed. Another perfect shot, another dead Vrak, another recording of Marcus's final moments. What truly terrified the Vrak wasn't just the killing. It was the precision. Jake never missed, never wasted ammunition, never revealed his position. Every shot was a work of art, demonstrating mastery of ballistics, weather patterns, and battlefield psychology. The Vrak began to understand that they weren't fighting a soldier. They were being hunted by something much more dangerous, a human who had perfected the art of war. On the 15th day, something unexpected happened. A new transmission reached the installation, but it wasn't from Vrak Command. It was from the UES Horizon, Commander Chen's voice cutting through the static. "Lieutenant Colonel Rivera, respond immediately. You're ordered to cease hostile operations and return to base." Jake listened to the message while maintaining his scope sight on a Vrak officer who was trying to repair their main communication array. He squeezed the trigger gently, watched the alien tumble from the tower, then activated his comm system. "Negative, Horizon. Mission is not complete. Jake, this is Sarah Chun. I know you're hurting, but this isn't what Marcus would have wanted. Come home. Marcus would have wanted his killers to pay." Jake replied, shifting his position to maintain visual on the facility. "I'm giving them exactly what they deserve. The Vrak High Council has contacted Earth directly," Chun continued. "They're calling this an act of terrorism. If you don't stand down, there could be consequences for the entire fleet." Jake's laugh was cold and humorless. "Commander, with respect, the Vrak killed my brother because they thought humans were weak. They thought they could murder our people without consequences. I'm teaching them otherwise. Jake, please, I'll come home when the job is finished, Commander. Rivera out." Jake cut the communication and returned to his work. He understood Chen's position, but she didn't understand what was really happening here. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about establishing precedent. The Vrak needed to learn that killing humans had a price, and that price would always be paid in full. Inside the facility, Warprime Zethkar was facing his own crisis. Half of his remaining warriors were demanding evacuation, while the others wanted to mount a final assault against their invisible enemy. Zethkar knew both options would result in massive casualties. The human sniper had demonstrated patience that bordered on supernatural. He could wait forever, picking them off one by one until none remained. For the first time in his career, Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before: helplessness. The Vrak were warriors who prized direct confrontation and honorable combat. This human fought like a ghost, striking without warning and vanishing without trace. It violated every principle of warfare that Zethkar understood. But as the days passed, Zethkar began to develop a grudging respect for his enemy. The human's precision was flawless, his patience infinite, and his tactical knowledge superior to most Vrak war leaders. This wasn't mindless violence. It was calculated, methodical warfare conducted by a master of his craft. On the 18th day, Zethkar made a decision that would have been unthinkable to any other Vrak commander. He walked out of the facility alone, carrying only a white flag and a recording device. He stood in the open courtyard, knowing that the human could kill him at any moment, and began to speak. "Human warrior, I am War Prime Zethkar. I commanded the forces that killed your brother. I accept full responsibility for his death. If you seek justice, take my life and spare my remaining warriors." They were following orders, as your brother was following his. Jake watched the alien through his scope, finger resting lightly on the trigger. It would be so easy. One shot, and the creature responsible for Marcus's death would be gone. But something made him hesitate. Zethkar continued speaking. "Your brother died with courage. When we captured his team, he refused to reveal human military secrets even under interrogation. He died protecting information that could have saved Vrak lives. I respect this dedication, though it brought him no benefit." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Marcus had been tortured before his execution, but he had never broken. He had died protecting the fleet, protecting Jake, protecting everyone he cared about. "I have studied your military records," Zethkar said. "You are Lieutenant Colonel Jake Rivera, specialist in long-range combat and tactical reconnaissance. Your accuracy rating is the highest in human military history. Your brother spoke of you before he died. He said you were the finest warrior he knew." Jake felt his hands trembling slightly. Marcus had talked about him, even under torture. His little brother had been proud of him, right until the end. "I propose single combat," Zethkar continued. "You and I, warrior to warrior. If you win, my remaining forces will surrender unconditionally. If I win, your fleet will have one less sniper to worry about. Either way, this siege ends with honor." Jake stared through his scope at the alien commander. Zethkar was offering something no Vrak had ever offered human before. Respect. Not fear, not surrender, but actual acknowledgement that humanity could produce warriors worthy of Vrak attention. For the first time in weeks, Jake smiled. This was what Marcus would have wanted. Not senseless slaughter, but a chance to prove that humans could stand as equals with any species in the galaxy. Jake spent 6 hours considering Zethkar's proposal. Single combat would mean giving up his greatest advantage, distance and concealment. The War Prime was a genetically enhanced warrior, stronger and faster than any human. In close-quarters combat, Jake would be at a severe disadvantage. But as he thought about Marcus, Jake realized that his brother would have accepted the challenge without hesitation. Marcus had always believed that humans could stand toe-to-toe with any alien species if they had the courage to try. Now Jake had a chance to prove that belief was correct. Jake activated his communicator and transmitted on the frequency Zethkar had been monitoring. "War Prime, I accept your challenge. But we do this on human terms. Choose your weapon and meet me in the center of the facility courtyard at dawn. No interference from your warriors, no tricks, no backup plans. Just you and me." Zethkar's response came immediately. "Agreed, human warrior. I will bring the traditional Vrak dueling blade. What weapon do you choose?" Jake looked at his beloved sniper rifle, then at the combat knife hanging from his belt. The knife had belonged to his father, carried through 3 different wars before being passed down to Jake. It seemed fitting that it would be used to avenge Marcus. "A blade," Jake replied. "We'll settle this the old way." That night, both warriors prepared for what they knew might be their final battle. Zethkar performed the ritual cleansing ceremonies of his people, meditation, and martial exercises designed to focus the mind for combat. His remaining warriors watched in respectful silence, understanding that their leader was about to face death with honor. Jake cleaned his equipment methodically, securing his sniper rifle and checking his combat gear one final time. He thought about Marcus, about their childhood on New Perth, about all the times his younger brother had looked up to him with absolute trust. Tomorrow, he would either justify that trust or die trying. At dawn, both warriors walked into the courtyard. Zethkar stood nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian scales gleaming in the morning light. The dueling blade in his hands was a work of art, curved metal that seemed to shimmer with its own inner fire. His yellow eyes were calm and focused, showing no trace of fear. Jake looked small by comparison, barely 6 feet tall, and carrying a simple combat knife. But his stance was perfect, balanced, and ready, and his blue eyes held the same calm focus as his opponent's. "Your brother fought well," Zethkar said, raising his blade in salute. "He brought honor to his species." "He was the best of us," Jake replied, returning the salute. "Today, you pay for taking him from us." The fight began with explosive violence. Zethkar moved with the enhanced speed of his species, the dueling blade cutting through the air in precise, deadly arcs. Jake rolled aside, his smaller size allowing him to avoid the alien's reach while looking for an opening. For 10 minutes, they danced around each other, blade meeting blade in showers of sparks. Zethkar had the advantages of reach, strength, and speed, but Jake had something more valuable: experience fighting aliens who were stronger and faster than himself. Jake had learned during his years in the outer colonies that humans couldn't match alien physical capabilities directly. Instead, they had to be smarter, more adaptable, and more ruthless. While Zethkar fought with the formal precision of ritual combat, Jake fought like a human, dirty, unpredictable, and absolutely determined to win. The turning point came when Zethkar attempted a classical overhead strike designed to split his opponent in half. Jake stepped inside the alien's reach instead of retreating, accepting a glancing blow to his shoulder in order to drive his combat knife up under Zethkar's ribs. Both warriors staggered apart, bleeding from their wounds. Zethkar's yellow eyes showed surprise for the first time. No opponent had ever gotten inside his guard like that. The human was faster than any of his species should be, and far more cunning than Vrak intelligence reports had suggested. "Impossible," Zethkar hissed, purple blood running down his scale hide. "Humans are not warriors." "You're about to learn otherwise," Jake replied, shifting his grip on the bloody knife. The second exchange was even more violent than the first. Zethkar abandoned formal technique and fought with pure aggression, trying to overwhelm Jake through sheer brutality. But Jake had been preparing for this moment his entire life, every training session and combat mission building toward this single fight. Jake moved like liquid lightning, ducking under sweeping blade strokes and sliding past desperate thrusts. His knife found its target again and again, opening wounds in Zethkar's arms, legs, and torso. The alien's enhanced healing kept him fighting, but he was slowing down with each passing second. Finally, Zethkar made a mistake. Frustrated by his inability to land a killing blow, he overextended on a thrust aimed at Jake's heart. Jake twisted aside and grabbed the alien's weapon arm, using Zethkar's own momentum to drive his combat knife deep into the Warprime's neck. Zethkar dropped to his knees, dark blood bubbling from his mouth. His yellow eyes met Jake's blue ones, and for a moment, there was no hatred between them. Just two warriors who understood each other perfectly. "Your brother," Zethkar whispered with his dying breath, "would be proud." The Warprime collapsed face first onto the courtyard stones, his weapon clattering beside him. Jake stood over the body, breathing heavily and bleeding from a dozen wounds. Around the courtyard, the remaining Vrak warriors knelt in submission, acknowledging his victory according to their ancient laws. Jake had won, but the victory felt hollow. Marcus was still dead, and no amount of revenge could bring him back. All Jake had accomplished was to prove that humans could fight as fiercely as any species in the galaxy. Maybe that would have to be enough. The surrender ceremony took place 3 hours after Zethkar's death. The surviving 43 Vrak warriors lined up in the courtyard, each one laying down their weapons according to ancient protocol. As the victor, Jake had the right to claim their lives, their equipment, and their honor. Instead, Jake surprised them all. Warprime Zethkar fought with courage, he announced, speaking in basic Vrak that he had learned during his intelligence training. His death was honorable. You served him well. I claim no trophies from brave enemies. The lead Vrak warrior, a scaled female named Kessera, looked up at Jake with obvious confusion. "Human, by our laws, we are your property now. Our lives belong to you." "Your lives belong to yourselves," Jake replied. "Return to your ships and carry word to your High Council. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humans protect their families, and Anyone who harms our people will answer for it. But also tell them that we respect courage when we see it. Jake turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. I want the complete records of my brother's interrogation and execution. Not to cause pain, but to understand how he died. His family deserves to know. Kazara nudda sluli. It will be done, human warrior. Your brother's final words were of you. He said his brother would make the Confederacy pay for this crime. He was correct. The flight back to the U.S. Horizon took 4 days. Jake spent most of the time in medical, having his wounds treated and his exhausted body restored. But his mind kept returning to Zeth Karr's final words and to the respect he had seen in the dying alien's eyes. When Jake finally docked with the Horizon, he was met by Commander Chun and a full honor guard. Word of his actions had spread throughout the fleet, and he had become something of a legend overnight. The sniper who had taken on an entire Vrak installation alone and emerged victorious. But Jake felt no pride in his accomplishment. He had set out to avenge his brother, and he had succeeded. But success felt empty when there was no one left to share it with. Commander Chun escorted Jake to her private office, where she poured 2 glasses of real Earth whiskey and waited for him to speak first. Marcus is still dead, Jake said finally. Nothing I did changed that. No, Chun agreed. But you changed something else. 3 hours ago, we received a transmission from the Vrak High Council. They're calling for a formal peace conference to establish new rules of engagement between our species. They specifically mentioned the need to acknowledge human martial capabilities in any future agreements. Jake looked up from his whiskey. They're scared of us now. Respectfully scared, Chun corrected. There's a difference. For the first time since first contact, they're treating us as equals rather than as inferior beings to be bullied and tested. That's worth something. Over the following weeks, Jake received the complete records of Marcus's final days. Reading them was the hardest thing he had ever done, but it was also strangely comforting. His brother had faced torture and death with incredible courage, never revealing a single piece of intelligence that could harm humanity. Marcus had died as he had lived, protecting the people he cared about. The peace conference convened 6 months later on the neutral world of Haven Station. Jake was invited to attend as an observer, representing the human military's position on prisoner treatment and rules of engagement. He found himself sitting across from Kessera, who had been promoted to War Prime after Zeth Karr's death. Your species is unexpected, she told him during a break in negotiations. We studied human military records for decades before making contact. We believed you were soft, weak, unsuited for warfare. We were wrong. We're not naturally warriors, Jake admitted. But we become dangerous when we're protecting something we love. That's what you discovered when you killed my brother. The High Council has issued new standing orders regarding human prisoners, Kessera continued. They're to be treated with full military honors and exchanged rather than executed. Your brother's death and your response to it has changed how we view your entire species. The peace treaty signed that day wasn't perfect, but it established clear boundaries and consequences for both sides. More importantly, it included provisions for prisoner exchange and protection that would ensure no other human would die the way Marcus had. Jake returned to the Horizon and resumed his duties, but he was no longer the same man who had left for Kepler 442 months earlier. He had proven that humans could stand against any enemy, but he had also learned the true cost of war. Every shot he fired, every mission he completed, was in memory of the brother who had believed in him until the very end. Years later, when new recruits asked about the Vrak Peace Accords, they were told the story of Scout Marcus Rivera and his brother Jake. How one man's love for his family had changed the course of human-alien relations forever. How a single sniper had taught the galaxy that humanity would never again be dismissed as weak or defenseless. They called it the Rivera Protocol, harm a human's family, and face the consequences. It became the foundation of human military doctrine for generations to come, a reminder that courage and love could overcome any odds. Marcus Rivera had died exploring the unknown, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Jake Rivera had avenged his death and secured humanity's place among the warrior races of the galaxy. Together, the brothers had shown the universe what humans were truly capable of when they had something worth fighting for. The stars themselves would remember their names.